Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. A touch of a cold, but other than that I'm fine. I suppose with the changing of seasons, that invariably happens to all of us. So let's continue. Well, let's start with our story tonight, but before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, Walter Perkins sat at his desk in his rather plush, comfortable home office, looking over the rather prepossessing views of the family's front yard, which was a dramatic contrast compared to his rather opulent-looking offices in Seattle, where he'd invariably be glancing over the very distinctive views of the Seattle skyline. But here at home, everything was homely and pleasant, certainly reassuring in this upmarket neighbourhood that was an enviable place to live, with beautiful parks on your front doorstep, along with some fabulous vintage shops only a short walk away. It was a beautiful spring morning, and on the street he could see a young man going for an energetic morning jog. He was working up quite a sweat, it would seem, as his orange T-shirt was clinging to him and seemed incredibly damp. Every time Walter saw people exercising, he would experience a prickle of guilt, for he hadn't exercised in the last decade or so, as his whole life appeared to revolve around his work, and probably wasn't doing his health any favours. He noticed his neighbour, Julie Holland, from 2 doors down, devotedly walking her 2 beloved Pekinese, Poncho and Lamondie. Seeing Julie Holland was not uncommon, as the woman fastidiously walked her dogs twice a day, come rain or shine, which was admirable. She had never hidden the fact that they were like children to her. "I always wanted a baby," she had told Walter a couple of days ago, in a friendly conversation they had enjoyed together on the street corner. At the time, Walter had left his home office and taken a very quick walk to the corner shop in order to buy some milk for his coffee, as the caffeine in coffee helped him get through a hard day and ward off those inevitable hunger pangs. He couldn't abide drinking coffee black. In his grandiose offices at work, he only had to tap a button, and his secretary Lucinda Dyer would be there on command, like a genie from a magic lamp. She'd breeze into his office and ask him what he needed, and then she'd go to the coffee shop and bring him some of his favourite coffee, along with a salmon and cream cheese bagel. But at home things didn't pan out like that, as more often than not his wife was out playing tennis with a girlfriend in the morning. So Walter knew without milk in the refrigerator a walk to the shop was in order, and if the truth be told, he very much needed the exercise, and he knew it would do him good, as he got rather stiff sitting on the chair all day long. It was on this short little trek to the shop he had bumped into Julie Holland, who was quite a chatty, gregarious, warm-hearted character, whom everyone in the neighbourhood appeared to love. She was one of those genuinely straightforward people that always wore her heart on her sleeve. "That's news to me," said Walter. "I had no idea you wanted a baby." He looked genuinely surprised by Julie Holland's startling revelation that had knocked him for 6, because in this neighbourhood people were rarely as direct as Julie was. He'd always been under the distinct, rather misleading impression that Julie Holland was only interested in dogs, and was one of those people who had never even considered having a baby of her own. "To tell you the truth, Julie, you never struck me as the type of woman who'd be interested in having children," he had said quite candidly, doing nothing to hide the obvious surprise written all over his face. "It seems I got you wrong, Julie, although why I had any preconceived ideas about you, goodness knows. You always think you have people figured out, don't you? And then you realise you got them all horribly wrong. And I suppose I just thought you were dead set against having kids because you put so much energy into your dogs. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. People have different priorities in their lives." Julie Holland had let out a light-hearted chuckle. "That's what most people believe about me and my husband Ian," she said. "Most people think that Ian and I are obsessed with our Pekineses, so much so that we wanted to have no children of our own at all. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. Nor did they have the remotest clue what Ian and I have been through, the battles we've endured, that have not been easy on us, let me tell you. When I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I kept falling pregnant, and then having one miscarriage after another. I lost over 10 pregnancies. Can you believe that? All in the first trimester, she said.
Good Lord,
said Walter, his jaw dropping to the ground.
It's bad enough for a woman to have 1 or 2 miscarriages, but 10? I cannot imagine the hell you must have been going through at the time.
Well, yes, it did break my heart, Julie admitted. I knew that Ian was devastated. I mean, he'd always wanted children, you see. Before we got married, we were both hoping to have 2 girls and 2 boys. We had it all perfectly worked out for ourselves. We had wildly exciting dreams and expectations of having a very large family together. But it never occurs to you that sometimes your dreams in life may not be fulfilled in reality. But when Ian and I got married, I guess we ignorantly believed that pregnancy would be a walk in the park for us. Nothing could have been further from the truth.
Did you find out why you kept having miscarriages? Asked Walter curiously. Surely there must have been some medical explanation about this.
That's an excellent question that I ask myself a lot. Certainly I have over the last 10 years or so. Why can't I carry a baby to full term? I'm afraid no one is any wiser as to why I had so many miscarriages. I guess it remains one of those enigmatic mysteries that no one has ever solved. I had numerous tests, of course, to find out what was going on with me. But the medical experts couldn't find any logical reason why my body kept rejecting my pregnancies. I mean, sometimes doctors just don't have the answers, do they?
No, they most certainly don't, Walter admitted, shaking his head rather sorrowfully.
He'd always liked Julie Holland, and her sad story tugged at his heartstrings.
Growing up, he said, I always thought doctors were like gods and could fix every problem known to man. But now I realise how wrong I was. I remember my father went to the doctor once for his regular MOT, if you can call it that. My mother was most insistent that he had regular check-ups with the doctor very frequently. She was pedantic like that. She even took her 2 cats to the vets twice a year for the vet to run blood tests on them to ensure they were absolutely healthy, and nothing was clandestinely going wrong with their kidneys. She was very worried about her cats' kidneys. They were both Burmese cats, you see, and they have a notorious problem with their kidneys, so it was something that she wanted to check out all the time. My dad, of course, well, he got a clean bill of health, and 3 days later he was dead. I remember when my father came home, that day after the visit to the doctor, he was full of the joys of spring. Said to my mother very jovially, You're stuck with me for a very long time, love. The doctors say I'm in excellent health.
Good Lord, that is frightening. I am very sorry about that, said Julie Holland. What did your father actually die of, if you don't mind me asking? Do you actually know?
A heart attack, would you believe it, which the doctors themselves never saw coming. So yes, I do view doctors with a healthy scepticism. They certainly don't have all the answers, like you say. And when you learn how many people die every year from being prescribed the wrong meds by doctors, you realise you need to tread carefully with your health and live each day to the fullest, for the way I see it, life is extremely fleeting. I should take my own advice, though. I can't remember the last time I saw the inside of a gym, and certainly my diet could be easily improved.
You're right about doctors, Walter, not having all the answers, Julie agreed. I think far too often we think they do have the answers, and when we realise they don't, it can throw you through a loop. I went to my gynecologist, you know, to find out what was wrong with me, and as I was saying to you, numerous tests were done, and he couldn't find an answer. So what did I do? I went to 5 more gynecologists to see if they couldn't find any reason why my pregnancies couldn't go past the first trimester. None of them found anything wrong with me. It was like they were completely stumped. So the general consensus of opinion was that I had just been unlucky, and I should try again.
What did I say? Said Walter scathingly. Doctors are not gods, and sooner the people realise that, the better. I always believe we ought to be responsible for our own health, because it's better not to have to fix something that's already broken. I hope you don't mind me asking you this, Julie, but how did you feel after 10 miscarriages? Sorry, that's probably a stupid question. It must have sucked the life out of you. I cannot imagine if my Amy had lost any of her pregnancies, how she'd have coped. I don't think she'd have handled it well, and she is a strong woman.
I don't think any woman handles a miscarriage well, especially if they really, really want a baby, Julie admitted. I can't believe I'm talking about all this to you, Walter, on the street corner of all things. It's probably not the best place to bare one's soul to your neighbour. But you're very easy to talk to, Walter. In truth, I felt exhausted, defeated, crushed each time I lost a baby. Ian and I both felt as if God was punishing us, almost as if in a former lifetime we'd done something terribly bad.
I'm sure that's not the case, said Walter. I can understand why you both might feel that way. I guess some of us get luckier than others. But I don't doubt we all have challenges along the way. I know that I certainly do.
You make a good point there, Walter, said Julie reflectively, looking down lovingly at her two Pekinese that were both sniffing some grass around a bed of spring daffodils that had recently popped their bright yellow heads through the rich earth. I guess when life throws you a curveball like that, well, it's hard not to take it personally, isn't it? For a long time I lost my faith in God and man, and I can honestly say I had no hope for my future. I guess I falsely believed that if I couldn't be a mother, I'd never be able to find true happiness for myself. I'm ashamed to say that I had a very bleak outlook about things, which looking back was utterly ridiculous. For there's always someone so much more worse off than you are. But I guess we don't always appreciate our blessings like we should. One day I took an entire bottle of pills. I just didn't want to wake up. Luckily Ian found me lying in the bath, completely unconscious. He rushed me off to the hospital where they pumped my stomach. When I woke up in my hospital bed, I was so bitterly disappointed that I was alive, because the pain of all those miscarriages had just been too much for me to bear. I guess at that point I thought I'd reached the point of no return.
Good Lord, said Walter. I'm sorry, Julie. I had no idea you'd been through all this. I don't know what to say. I'm very glad your husband Ian found you, or you might not be here today. You could have drowned in that bathtub, besides anything else.
That is very true, Walter. It's amazing I did not. But I'm very pleased he found me, Julie admitted. I really didn't want to take those pills, if the truth be told. I guess it was a cry for help. I think when you hit rock bottom, you can't sink any lower, can you? I genuinely thought that Ian and I were destined to be lonely for the rest of our lives. I told him he could divorce me if he liked, find a really nice lady who could give him the family he always wanted. I genuinely didn't want him to feel cheated in his life and inwardly resent me for our childless fate, so to speak. I actually encouraged him to leave me, feeling certain that that is what he would obviously want. But Ian point-blank refused. He told me I was the quintessential love of his life, and when he proclaimed his marital vows until death we do part, he had meant every word of them. My husband said that if children weren't on the itinerary of our lives, we could do other things like travel the world, stuff like that. And the rich tapestry of life didn't have to always involve children. I knew I hit the jackpot in marrying him. He always put me first, you know, over and above every other priority in his life. And he still does that. And he's at peace with the fact that we never had children together. So I've been a very lucky woman being married to a man like him, who has very gracefully accepted the cards that fate dealt for the both of us.
Your husband's a very good man, Walter agreed, but I can't say I'm surprised he wanted to stay with you. He loves you, Julie, and rightly so. I can assure you, good women or men are not easy to come by. If they were, there would be not such a demand on all those dating sites you hear about, where people spend their lives trying to find a true and lasting love. My secretary at work is always perusing those websites, and still hasn't met anyone that's a keeper. I can see why you took it personally when you kept having miscarriages, but you shouldn't view it like that. I'm quite sure you and Ian did nothing to deserve any of this. Sometimes life can be grossly unfair, and as to why this is the case, I frankly don't have the answers. I had no idea you'd been put through a mincemeat grinder like this. It makes me have a great admiration for you, Julie, and I really mean that."
"Well, there's no need to put me on a pedestal, Walter. I can assure you that I'm as imperfect and blemished as the next person is, probably more so, in fact. I will say that you and your lovely wife, Amy, are very fortunate to have two such delightful young children. They always come and say hello to Poncho and Lamondi when I take my walks with my dogs. I think Morgan is growing up incredibly fast into such a delightful young man, with his head firmly planted on those shoulders of his. And as for Primrose, she's as pretty as a picture, just like her name. How old are they now?"
"Primrose is 8. Morgan is 12,
said Walter. "Goodness gracious me, doesn't time fly?" said Julie, looking genuinely flabbergasted that Walter's kids were a lot older than she'd imagined they were. "Before you know it, your children will be leaving home and you'll be grandparents. Life goes by so very fast, does it not? I always say we need to make the most of every second and appreciate our loved ones all the way."
"Don't remind me of that," said Walter. "When I was young, I remember time went by so slowly, painfully slowly at times. But now that I'm older, time shoots by at one hell of a speed, so much so it's impossible to keep up with it. And don't tell the wife this. I notice that I'm getting a few grey hairs."
Julie laughed. "Well, I wouldn't worry about that. I think grey hair is very becoming on a man, no matter what age they are. It's rather debonair, if you ask me. Personally, I've always rather fancied a silver fox. I remember your wife told me she sailed through her pregnancies when she was pregnant with your two children. I don't mind admitting to you, Walter, I was extremely envious of her at the time. But I'm over all that now, I'm glad to say. There's nothing worse in life than being jealous of other people." She shrugged her shoulders. "It's such a wastefully pitiful emotion. But back then I couldn't help myself. Every time I saw a mother with a pram, I could feel the envy rising up in my belly. One time it got so bad when I was in a coffee shop, and a woman came in with a baby in a pram. I just rushed out of that shop and ran to my car. I sat there in the front seat in floods of tears. I cried for a couple of hours before I actually drove back home."
"Well, I think your envy is perfectly understandable," said Walter kindly. "It's a natural reaction, don't you think, when you see other people living your dream, popping out children like Pop-Tarts in the toaster? But you're not kidding about my wife's effortless pregnancies. That's why I was saying that life can be unfair and sometimes cruel. Some women have pregnancy easy, others do not. But I guess you could safely say that Amy was one of the lucky ones. When she fell pregnant with Primrose and Morgan, I have to tell you her pregnancies were very smooth. She never suffered morning sickness, nor did she get weird cravings for ice cream and pickles. She didn't even show much, as you would expect with a pregnant woman. But then Amy's always been slim and athletic. I began to wonder if she was pregnant at all. But a month before the birth she seemed to balloon a lot. She told me back then she looked like a beached whale. The births for her came so quickly, with virtually no pain. Even the midwives claimed they'd never had such easy deliveries. I had no idea that some people such as yourself had it so tough. I guess, unless it touches you personally, you wouldn't have a comprehension about things like that."
Julie Holland's blue eyes were shining. There was not a hint of sadness in her demeanour, as if not having children was not something that bothered her any more, as if she'd moved on with her life to a contented place of acceptance. "It is what it is," she said. "I'm very glad Amy had things so easy. You're right, she didn't show for a long time. I do remember that. To all intents and purposes, Ian and I came to terms with the fact that some things are just not meant to be. I guess I went through a deep depression, a grieving process, you could say, as did Ian. But bless his cotton socks, he never once complained about our circumstances. He was fatalistic about it all. He said if we kept losing our babies, we were probably just not meant to be parents. He said it was probably not our calling in life. And when he said that, I realized he was absolutely right. It made perfect sense to me."
"Maybe it is true," said Walter. Maybe our paths in life take us all on different journeys. Journeys we probably never anticipated. We're probably like different characters in a play, each with our individualistic idiosyncrasies, living our life according to a different script. And on your script you were probably not meant to have children, almost as if the director in charge of your story, rather like God himself, was saying, "No, that's not your role in this movie, Julie. We have other roles you need to play."
"That's what I wholeheartedly believe," said Julie. "And you know what, Walter? I've made peace with that. I think the breakthrough moment came for me when Ian returned home one day with little Poncho over here," said Julie, looking down fondly at the golden Pekingese with its dark button eyes. "At first, when my husband brought Poncho home, I told him I wanted nothing to do with the dog. I'd never really had much experience with animals. My father had terrible allergies growing up, you see, so we didn't have any pets of our own. I told Ian that the dog could never replace a baby. But Poncho got up onto my bed where I was curled up in a miserable ball, feeling so desperately sorry for myself. He cuddled up to me and began to lick my face so very gently. And after that I was so comforted my heart was completely won over. I felt as if I had something to take care of, even if my baby happened to be Fluffy. She's about 7 years old now, you know," said Julie, looking down at Poncho. "I promise you, Walter, within days I was a different person. So was my husband Ian. We were both completely smitten by our 2 dogs. You have no idea how life-changing animals can be. It was like our house came alive again, with a soulful, youthful, rambunctious energy. Even though there were only 2 people living under our roof, we might as well have had 12 kids running riot around the place. For dogs themselves behave like mischievous children, let me tell you. And the best thing about dogs is they're never going to leave home, are they?"
"You make a very good point there," Walter agreed. "I never thought of it quite like that, but you're absolutely right. If you have children, there'll come a time when they will leave home for good, living lives of their own. But your pets remain resolutely at your side."
Julie Holland smiled so brightly, it lit up her blue eyes. She glanced down at both her dogs with a contented expression on her face that was so serene. In that moment Walter felt a tug of jealousy. He couldn't remember a time he'd felt content in his life. Sometimes he felt as if he was chasing his own tail, like a dog going around and around in circles, with all the business deals and negotiations that screamed every day for his undivided attention. And Walter was regrettably reluctant to delegate responsibility to anyone else. He assumed that no one else was capable of solving the problems better than he could. But this approach had cost him dearly on the home front. There was no doubt his beloved wife Amy and their 2 children were the joy of his life, but he felt as if something was sorely missing from his life. But what it was he couldn't be sure. Julie Holland reflected on her face a peace he longed to acquire for himself, but he couldn't personally find. She might have been down a tumultuous road with all those miscarriages she had endured along the way, but in her adversity she appeared to have found herself, and it would seem had acquired some purposeful meaning to her life, which Walter felt didn't apply to him, because it felt for him as if life was passing him by, rather like a steam train chugging along at a fast pace, but never quite arriving at its due destination. Somewhere deep down in his heart, Walter knew he couldn't go on like this any more. Something would have to give. He felt he had not found his purpose in life. Everyone said when you got married and had children and found the quintessential perfect job where you made enough money so you never had to worry about a bill again, that you'd feel on top of the world, like one of those intrepid explorers that reaches the top of Mount Everest and feels a great sense of reward for their courageous accomplishments. But it hadn't been like that getting to the top for Walter, because it wasn't what it was cracked up to be. On the contrary, Walter did not feel accomplished nor successful, although he most certainly was on top of his game when he was overseeing his high-profile company in Seattle, where he almost certainly called all the shots. He might have succeeded on the work front, but had failed abysmally in being a good father to his 2 children and a great husband to his loving wife. He felt rather like a bottom feeder in a tank of goldfish that spends its day eating up the algae on the side of the fish tank. He really didn't believe his life had to date found the depth and meaning he was looking for. If he took an honest look at his life, he felt it was insipid, dull, and shallow, rather like an ancient photograph from the 40s that begins to fade every year. There was no doubt that his children and wife did bring colour to his days, but he never got to see them very much. So the void within him was so empty. Everything he had done to fill up the hole inside him had made things 1,000 times worse. As Walter spoke quite frankly to Julie Holland, with a candidness that even surprised him, he noticed there was an enviable light in her eyes, which he so wished he could snatch away from her, like a thief prizing away a woman's wallet from her purse. Julie Holland seemed oblivious that Walter was having a moment of soulful reflection, where his conversation with her had brought him to the rather grim, unsatisfactory realization that despite his many accomplishments in life, he was running on empty, like a petrol tank that is completely burned out. Julie Holland was still discussing her miscarriages. "Oh, it seems like a lifetime ago," she told Walter. "In truth, they no longer seem relevant. It's amazing how you can move on from tragedy," she said. "These days I take my dogs to the local hospice to visit dying patients. I guess I realized if my dogs could lift me out of my own melancholia, they might be able to do exactly the same for other people. So that was when I started visiting hospice. I thought the nursing staff and doctors would turn me away, but on the contrary, they welcomed me warmly and believed my dogs might be able to help some of their patients. And they certainly did. I can promise you, Walter, it is a privilege to witness miracles almost every day of my life, as both Poncho and Lamondi over here bring those dying patients so much comfort. So I definitely feel I've found my calling. I can assure you, Walter, nothing is more gratifying than seeing a dying patient facing the last weeks of life, receiving so much comfort from my dogs. I also visit the children's hospice, you know, and the children adore seeing Lamondi and Poncho. Their eyes light up like Christmas trees, and some of those children have absolutely no hair on their heads and are incredibly weak. But I marvel at their bravery in their facing death. You should see how Poncho and Lamondi behave around these dying people. It's like they understand the patients are dying. Dogs are clever like that, you know. Poncho and Lamondi bring these people great joy. Some of the nurses tell me that some dying patients that have failed to respond in weeks just suddenly brighten up. They develop an appetite when they haven't eaten for days on end, after I've introduced them to the dogs. It's precious moments like these, when I talk to patients about their impending deaths, that I learn so much. Many of them can't talk to their own families about the fact that they're dying. It can be rather a taboo subject, you know, rather like the elephant in the room that they just don't want to discuss. So that's where I come in. I listen to their concerns, and they enjoy having someone to talk to." "That's very interesting," said Walter. "What do the patients say to you? Do they have any regrets? Silly question. I'm quite sure everybody must have." "Oh, absolutely they do," said Julie. "The dying can teach the living a lot, you know. I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned from the dying is that life is far too short, so we need to live our life with integrity and to make the most of every single opportunity it presents us with. If your life is self-serving and selfish, sooner or later you're going to have to face your demons and come to terms with the fact that you could have made a difference out there if you had lived a little better. You can die so much more peacefully if you've lived a full and loving life. But if you've left things unsaid, well, your death might not be so peaceful. So yes, Walter, I guess you can say I have found my calling in life, which is why I no longer nurse any regrets. These days I'm extremely fulfilled, very happy, and so is my husband Ian. I realise that far from being unfortunate, we are among the lucky ones, for we were guided down the right path, you could say. Perhaps if I had been a mother, I'd never have given back to society like I'm doing now. I'd probably have been caught up with the world of my children and all their issues, and too concerned with their needs to focus on anybody else's." "Well, it sounds to me, Julie, as if you've found your purpose and calling," said Walter, once again feeling that incongruous tug of jealousy pulling very hard at his heartstrings. What on earth was wrong with him? Julie Holland deserved to be happy. She'd been through hell and back with all these miscarriages in her life that he had known nothing about until today. He and his wife Amy had 2 beautiful children, Morgan and Primrose, a lovely home, plenty of money in the bank, and he had a successful job. He was jealous of this woman, whom he'd never really known that well, but now he felt he knew her a whole lot better after their light-hearted conversation that had suddenly grown very deep. Julie Holland had an enviable glow on her face that was almost angelic, that if he had to be honest about, he'd only ever seen in a handful of people during the course of his life. People that would invariably light up the room with their bubbly personalities, who carries happiness on their person everywhere they go, like a box of candies. So whoever is in their company invariably becomes richly happy. So there we are. That is the end of part 1 of our story. Part 2 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.